Welcome everyone, come on in, get settled. We're glad to have you here today. You can drop in the chat window what state you're coming from and what the temperature is.
Got Florida and they say it's sunny and 75. Oh, Wisconsin, 33.
33 degrees in Wisconsin.
Indiana is 45. Huntsville, Alabama, shout out to Miss Turner, 57 degrees.
Okay.
Pennsylvania is windy at 45. North Carolina, hi Miss Simmons, is 66. Tennessee is 57. There's Atlanta at 60 degrees. My goodness, Minnesota, 34 degrees.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Season 4 of Crossing America. I'm your host, Dr. Drizzle. And in the chat today, we have Miss Bell, Miss Schwanekamp, Miss Zimmerman, and Miss Brown. So teachers, if you have questions during this event, if you will drop them into the chat window, our amazing moderators from Tennessee, Indiana, Georgia, and Wyoming will take your questions and then they will get them to us through the magnificent, miraculous texting that we have going on here. So again, welcome to Crossing America. Special thanks to the National Park Foundation for your support. This is Season 4, and as you can tell, it is sunny out here and we're in a wet environment. So welcome to Everglades National Park. Ranger Yvette, we have been together for about 4 years now, and we're thrilled to be back here again. So excited to experience this place. Now, we just heard some of the temperatures that were coming in. We are about 80 degrees, but it feels like about 85 degrees because the sun is right on us. But how cool is it that we're standing in the water? So tell us a little bit about yourself, Ranger Yvette.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be with all of our students all over the United States. Welcome to Everglades National Park. And I am the Director of Education here at Everglades National Park. I am so lucky to be here for 15 years. And I get to teach boys and girls just like yourselves about these marvelous ecosystems that call the Everglades home.
I love that. And you work with other rangers. In fact, today we were thrilled to work with 3 of your rangers. Let's see if I can remember. We had Dylan here a little bit earlier working on some Wi-Fi issues out in the park. And then we had Amy and Colby brought some props out to us. So thank you to you 3 for being amazing park rangers and women in the National Park Service. Well, as we said, we're at Everglades National Park. So let's look on the screen for just a moment. I'm going to go to the deck and we're going to see where we are located. So students, I want you to get your journals out and I want you to post this on your map or draw your map, and notice that we're at the tip bottom of Florida. Now, there are over 430 national park sites in our country. Down here, we are very lucky because we are sort of a sisterhood of national parks. We're at Everglades National Park. Last year, we live streamed from Big Cypress National Preserve, but we also have Biscayne National Park and Dry Tortugas. So teachers, if later, if you want to check out some of the videos online to see where we have been before, but we all share something in common, and that is water.
Indeed.
So we're going to talk about water today and the importance of it. So this is a watershed. What makes a watershed so vital to the ecosystem?
Absolutely. So what's very interesting about the Everglades is that many people look at this water and think that it's a swamp. They may look into the water, it might look dirty, it might look full of just things that are unidentifiable to the eye. But what's going on is actually this water is moving. Marjory Stoneman Douglas coined the name the river of grass. And this is not a swamp, it is a moving watershed. And in that motion, there is constant life. As that water travels from the northern areas as far north as Orlando, it actually continues through the Kissimmee River Basin, fills up Lake Okeechobee, and although a lot of that is managed these days, that water eventually makes it down to Everglades National Park. And that's without even talking about the water that comes right from the sky. So the Everglades is receiving this water. It is a constant watershed across all of these ecosystems, helping life happen in this park. It is the first national park to be set aside for its biodiversity, which of course is life.
Well, thinking about biodiversity, a little bit earlier today, this place was filled with birds.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a few birds? Now, we have contacted them, Ernie the egret, and we've asked them to come back. I think they're taking a lunch break, right?
Yes.
The union rules.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about what we would find here in this ecosystem.
Absolutely. So this shallow water is perfect because our wading birds, with their nice long legs, can walk around while still preserving their feathers and not getting them wet. But if they're sight feeders, they're really patient, just like Ernie or egret that we saw earlier, just standing ever so still with those sharp beaks, waiting for the right fish or frog or snake to aim and make that their breakfast or a snack. But you also have the wading birds that are touch feeders. And our touch feeders prefer the water just slightly lower because their legs are a little shorter, but they will walk around moving constantly. And it's not uncommon to see side by side some of our touch feeders and our sight feeders. While some are creating havoc, the others are really patient, waiting for the fish to move out of the way from those touch feeders and take a dive for some breakfast or lunch. Now, of course, water brings life. So things like turtles and alligators and plenty of fish, and then all of our aquatic plants as well.
And we're going to take a look at some of those a little bit later. I want to go back to what you said about Marjory Stoneman Douglas and how she called this the river of grass. Now, if you were just to stand here and look, it doesn't look like it's moving, but it moves very slowly. Why is that important for the ecosystem health?
Absolutely. So as this water moves right underneath our feet, I'm sure you can feel it right with me, right? Move those feet. Can you feel some of that limestone right underneath us?
I can.
Absolutely. That rock called limestone is actually a very important part of not only our ecosystem, but the water that we drink here in South Florida. So as this water is moving ever so slowly, it is working its way through the limestone floor. It is percolating, if you will, and filling up the Biscayne aquifer. So the Biscayne aquifer is important to South Floridians. Whether you are visiting South Florida, you live here or work here, that water is the water we depend on. We turn on our faucets and brush our teeth and take a shower. So who would have ever told you that the water an alligator swims in is the same water you drank this morning or maybe you took a shower with?
I love that. It just shows that water connects all of us.
Absolutely.
In several of our past live streams, we focused on water at Mammoth Cave, at Acadia National Park. It's important to take care of our water systems. And I want you to think about that because later in this live stream, we're going to give you a challenge to how we should, as humans, protect this water system or these watersheds. Now, we're having an impact right now on this system. Like we've walked through here, we were very careful to move grasses away. The tree is touching me right here, but I'm not gonna mess with it. How is human impact or human activity had an impact on this?
So we'll start with the water since we've been talking about water. And we traveled back in time to South Florida. It truly is a beautiful place to live, right? We showcased our weather. Year round, we live pretty much in flip-flops and tank tops. So Florida has always been very attractive for people to come and visit and live here. But in order to do that, South Florida was flooded. completely flooded. As a matter of fact, not only South Florida, as far up as Orlando. So Central Florida all the way down created that river of grass, or that watershed we've been talking about. So in order for people to live here, we had to drain and create roads and canals and dikes and levees. And that, of course, changed the natural water flow for the Everglades. So that's one piece of it. And the second piece is, of course, we humans, we love our things, especially when we fall in love with beautiful plants and beautiful animals, and we want them as pets, or we want to decorate our homes. And that is when we introduce species that don't belong in South Florida, or non-native species. And then, of course, they become a problem if they have invasive tendencies. So that definitely does impact our native ecosystems, because whether you're a plant or an animal, you don't necessarily know how to compete with something that isn't part of the ecosystem.
Well, that reminds me of things we've talked about before, the difference between non-native and invasive. So non-native are plants, animals that are here, but they're not competing for the same resources. They find their own way. But an invasive, and correct me if I'm wrong, they are competing for the same resources of the native plants, and that's where the problem comes, right? It takes over what a native plant would need.
Correct, and not only does it take the resource from the native plant, but it also has no checks and balances, if you will, right? So it doesn't have a niche. So many of the plants and animals that are native to an ecosystem have a specific niche in that ecosystem, and there's a system of checks and balances that happen in nature. But when you introduce a plant that is not from that ecosystem, it doesn't have a natural predator, for example. So perhaps it will have lots of babies, and the babies have no predators, or there are no bugs or insects to eat away at a plant, for example. That those are natural occurrences that happen between native species.
We talked about human impact, right? Human activity. I'm sure pollution and trash is one of those things. Are there any restoration efforts being done here at the park? I know maybe leave no trace are the principles that we follow here, but what do we do to try to, when the humans don't follow the rules, how are we taking care of that?
Definitely. We're constantly looking for trash. And by we, it's not only the park rangers, it's all of you, right? This earth is all of ours. So we have to be out there keeping an eye out, looking for trash, making sure we're picking up after ourselves. And I think the biggest piece is education, like what we're doing today, right? Making sure that people are aware. Things like balloons, although we love to celebrate, and I think we've come such a long way. I'm so proud of our students and the awareness that they've brought to many adults, as a matter of fact, that balloons aren't a good thing to let go out into our ecosystems, because what goes up does come down. And here in South Florida, with our oceans right next door to us, or right down the street from where we're standing today, and even here, if balloons come down, our birds see shiny things, they put them as part of their nest. Turtles will eat balloons thinking that they are jellyfish, for example. So they are creating havoc all over the place. So doing our part, education, and making sure to keep an eye out and picking things up.
Absolutely. And not only teachers can be teachers, but students can be teachers.
Absolutely.
So when she's talking about this education, we know that you guys have been working for the last 5 years just with Crossing America in advocating for leave no trace, to make sure we're picking up trash, that we're not taking plants with us. Now, thinking about taking plants with us, I'm not sure if this is a secret or not. I should have asked you before, but I'm just going to try it. There is a plant here called a ghost orchid.
Ooh.
That is very special to this place, but it's also so beautiful that people like to go find it and photograph it and maybe even take some. That's a no-no as far as taking it, right?
Absolutely, and that goes for everything, even something as simple as a rock or a seed. So especially in national parks, but any place that you go, you don't want to remove anything from those ecosystems, even your backyard parks in your neighborhoods. If something is native to those areas, let's leave it alone, because not only can you enjoy it, but your friends and your neighbors can enjoy it. And who knows, when you get old enough, you can bring back your children and they can bring back their children. And that's the idea of our beautiful national parks. We want to leave all of the things so that everyone can come and enjoy it just the same.
Now that doesn't mean that you can't take back mementos. You can take photos.
Absolutely.
You could bring a journal when you come to the park or go to a community park. You can sketch it in your journal. And it looks like we have a question right now. So let's go to our students. And what is our question?
So Mrs. Zeck's class would like to know, do alligators swim with their eyes open?
Great question. I knew alligators was going to come up. Actually, we don't want them to come up here right now, but let's answer that.
That is such a great question. So alligators actually have 2 eyelids. And the first eyelid is almost like a goggle. It is transparent. So as they're swimming, it protects their eyes and they can see. So they'll bring down that first eyelid. And then when they're snoozing, which they do a lot of, especially in this warm sun, then they will close that second eyelid as well. So it is a wonderful adaptation for an animal that needs the water and hunts underneath the water a lot of the time. So what a great question.
And I'm going to share my scientific knowledge now. I believe that's called a nictitating eyelid. And frogs also have those. So write that down. We're going to see if Dave can figure out how to spell that and get that up. But again, nictitating eyelid. So
I believe together we got that right.
I think we did. I think we're showing our smartness here. But I also want to share that we don't have all the answers either. There are things that we have to Google, if you will.
Absolutely.
Always looking for several sources before we choose something that we share with you guys. But great, great question. This water, as you said, is not just dirty, trashy water. In fact, can you get a jar for just a moment?
Are you going to take my word for it, or should we test it?
I think we need to test it.
Okay, I'm going to grab a jar.
I can tell you now that it's very clean looking to me, but we're going to ask Ranger Yvette to get a glass jar. I'll take one too.
Okay.
Now this jar is a little dirty, so it might not be as good, but we're going to see if we can zoom in here.
We need to prove that they're empty. There's no magic tricks in here, right?
Okay, here we go.
All right, so I'm going to go over to the side since I just walked through, and let's take some water.
Oh, wow.
And let's take a look at that.
Look how clear that is. Now I'm looking in it right now and I see just a couple pieces of plant life in there, but that is very clear. In fact,
don't drink it.
I'm not going to drink it just because of maybe some bacteria or something in there.
That's right. There's plenty of life in the water. And before we would drink this right from the surface, I would encourage you to boil it. But remember, this is our drinking water.
Yeah.
And there's lots of life right at our feet. I mean, I could even introduce you to some of the plants that are filtering this water as we speak.
I want to see the plants right now.
Okay,
so I'm
all right.
going to dump this out.
So we can just set this here to the side. And let me introduce you to a very important character in the Everglades story.
I don't even want to tell you what that looks like.
Well, how about if you smell it first?
Okay. Just smells kind of dirt field. Or just me smelling something else? Help me with my smeller.
Does it smell like earthy?
Yeah, dirt.
Like fresh cut grass, maybe?
Fresh cut grass. That is absolutely. Now, I'm not putting that in my mouth, even though I will kiss it, because we have talked about this before. So here goes Dr. Drizzle kissing something. That was very, very good.
Well, this is periphyton.
Periphyton.
Periphyton, yes. And it is a whole bunch of different algae, and I want to give you a piece.
Oh, let me put this in my pocket.
There you go. And you already smelled it. I want you to squeeze it. Let's squeeze it. All that water coming out of it.
It's a sponge.
It is. And that's exactly one of the roles in this ecosystem. So it will absorb water. And the Everglades has 2 seasons, a wet season and a dry season. And as the dry season continues upon us. We are currently in the dry season. This periphyton will remain moist, and that's important because if we pick it apart just a little bit, we might get lucky and find some proof of
There
life.
is a bug in there.
Ooh. And I have a little worm in mine. So remember those wading birds we were talking about?
Yep.
They know how to pick apart this periphyton and find all kinds. See, there's a tiny little
There's
worm.
a little worm there. I'm glad I didn't kiss it with my mouth open.
Yeah. So it's all full of life. Now, if something has food, water, potential shelter, and space, it makes it a
An ecosystem.
habitat.
Yes.
A habitat. So food, water, shelter, space. So we are holding a habitat in our hand.
A habitat in the hands. Oh, we have a question that brought something up. What is our question?
So from Mrs. Turner's class, why does the water look brown, but when you put it in the cup, it's clear?
That is such a great question. And as you're looking at the water, you can look here behind me, you see a lot of the vegetation. And the vegetation and the bottom or the dirt is made up of the periphyton we were just talking about. And this periphyton, as you can see, is greens and browns. So the reflection or the appearance of the water is actually that same color as the plants, as well as that periphyton and the dirt and mud that's beneath our feet. If you think of a beach, just to give you a comparison, many times when we look into the ocean, the water appears to be blue. If you were to capture it in a cup, it would appear clear, just like we did today. But those blue colors comes as a result of the reflection of the sand or even some seagrasses that are growing underneath it. So what you're looking at is actually a reflection of what's beneath our feet.
Absolutely. And if you do a little research on things on sun reflections and how light reflects back to our eyes and how we have certain colors that we can see, but then there's certain colors that are reflected. So that looks like it's brought up another question. I'm going to hand you back this.
Okay.
As much as I love it, I'm going to get that out of my hands. And what is our other question?
Next question is from Jolinda, and she would like to know, are there poisonous plants and animals in the Everglades?
Great question.
That is a great question. And yes, there are poisonous plants and animals in the Everglades. The default that most people go to, of course, are our poisonous or venomous snakes. We have 4 venomous snakes in South Florida. We have 2 rattlesnakes, so a pygmy rattlesnake and a diamondback rattlesnake. We also have the water moccasin or cottonmouth. That is an aquatic snake, but remember, we're making lots of noise. Not interested in us.
Not interested.
Exactly. And then, gosh, the 4th one just escaped my brain. Give me a second, I'll remember that. It'll come back to me. And then, of course, we do have poisonous plants. We have things like poison ivy and poison wood, both predominant through a lot of North America.
Right.
Our poison wood is a tropical species, but the poison ivy is the same species that you can find pretty much any place in the United States.
Great. Great questions. It looks like we have another one.
Okay.
So the next one is, let's see, Mrs. Eiler's class wants to know, does the water smell?
That's a great question. And before I answer that, I'm going to say coral snake. I remember.
Coral snake was the other one, the 4th one.
Does the water smell? So you smelled the periphyton.
I smelled the periphyton, but that was actually smelled like cut grass, right?
And
so at that moment, it smelled like that.
Right. So if the water was smelly and that's full of water, did you think that maybe the periphyton would also be stinky?
Could be.
Right? So the water smells great. There's so much fresh air right here. If it were stinky water, we probably wouldn't be standing in it. We wouldn't be very happy. So it is perfectly clear and it smells wonderful. And again, remember that connection back to humans, back to animals. There are living things here. The plants, the animals, clean, non-polluted, non-smelly water is really important to life. And it is really important to us. And this water, again, goes through that Biscayne aquifer. We pump it out for our use. So it is clean water, and that's really important.
Well, I am curious about a carnivorous plant that you talked about earlier, because when I hear carnivore, I'm thinking something that wants to eat me, possibly. So can you tell us about something called a bladderwort?
Yes. So
do we have some?
We have some right here,
Ooh.
floating right amongst our feet, which is so exciting. And I promise you it's not interested in humans. So you can help me hold that up. So the first thing that I want to talk about this bladderwort, it is a non-rooted plant. So we didn't rip it out of the ground, which is a perfect adaptation for an area that the water fluctuates. As the water rises or falls with our wet season or our dry season, the bladderwort goes right along with the water.
Okay.
And it has a really important job. I know you're going to like this. The green parts, of course, is the plant, but these tiny sections that you might notice are little bladders. That is the part that eats unsuspecting insects.
Oh my goodness, they're so small.
Yes, so as it's floating around, a tiny mosquito might rub up against that, or another type of larva might rub up against these bladders, and it will suck them in. Now this one, oh, actually, look how exciting. It has a full belly on this side.
Oh my goodness.
So look at the difference. You can see just how dark these bladders are.
This one is light.
Right, look at the comparison. And that is a darker.
It actually has little things in there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious I saw some little green bulbs on here.
Oh, those are.
What is this?
That is the bloom, and actually those are the seeds.
So it's all together. It has everything it
is.
needs.
It does, right? So it's feeding itself with the bladders. It's also feeding itself, creating chlorophyll with these beautiful green parts using the sun without even being rooted. So it's not needing the soil.
But it needs water.
It does need water.
It needs water. So if this were to be pulled out, if we were to decide, oh, this is great, I'm going to go lay it on the fence, it wouldn't work. It's going to die. So that's where we're going to leave no trace. We might pick it up, but we're going to put it down in the same place. And that's a question kids ask a lot. Well, wonder if I'm at the beach and I pick up a shell and just walk down the beach with it a mile, can I put it back there? And I'm going to say no, because that shell could be a home for someone. So imagine a snail or a crab coming back and looking for its home, and it's not there anymore. So we're actually going to put this right back down where we found it.
We sure are.
I want to talk about these trees for just a moment. I thought that might be a question that comes up, but I'm so excited. These trees look dead, but that's not true.
They are not. So as you can see, they have no leaves, or in this case, needles. I have some evidence of some dry needles right above us. So we have some dry needles here, and I'm sure that if we dig down into the water, we can find some more dry needles. And what happens, again, going back to our seasons, as the wet season departs and the dry season arrives, these trees start to drop all of their needles. So they go green when they don't have the resource. They almost go dormant, if you will, similar to the trees up north.
Okay.
As trees drop their needles, they go dormant. These trees do it as a result of the resource. So if we look at the tree that's right next to me here, you can notice that there is a significant water level mark. And this water level mark shows us just how high the water came.
Okay.
Or was
in the wet season.
At the very end or the peak of the wet season.
Okay.
So we can see significantly how much lower it has gone.
So what I hear you saying is, if the leaves were still on, they would need more water.
Indeed.
So they drop the leaves to be a good steward of their resources. That makes a lot of sense. Even the trees here are trying to do good.
Yep.
I love that.
And that, of course, is an adaptation.
I love it. Now, earlier we looked down and we saw something called a sea pod. Can we grab one of those?
Yes.
Because kids, seeing how big these are, and even bigger in some places in Everglades and at Big Cypress. But here's where they started from. So let's see if we can zoom in a little bit and tell us what this is.
So we were so lucky when we walked in. We saw some of these floating seeds, and when I took a closer look, I noticed that they had tiny roots on them. These are baby cypress trees.
I think that is lovely. And it looks like if you've ever taken a lima bean and put it into a little bit of water and stuck it on a window in a classroom, there's a little green coming out of that now. Now, it's not connected anywhere. That's okay though, right?
Yes.
It's going to find its home in the soil pretty soon.
Absolutely. There are two things that can happen here. As they continue, the seed part of it continues to be waterlogged. They will start to go underneath the water, but more importantly, with that seasonality and the water continues to go down, it's going to find a dry spot at the perfect time to put those roots into the soil.
Now, if I were not practicing leave no trace, I might come here and think, oh, I'm going to take one of these and go plant it where I live in Chicago. That's a no-no, because these cypress are not native to where I may live, correct? So we are actually introducing non-native or invasives by taking it away. So again, kids, let's repeat after me. Leave no trace. Let me hear you. Leave no trace. I love that. You know what? We have been doing this for about 30 minutes now, and I like to do a little movement activity. So before we introduce something that they're probably all excited about, I think we need to do a little dance.
Oh,
all right, and
I
I think we should call it the alligator hole. Can we do that?
I love that idea.
Now you live here, so you have seen more than me. So tell me what we can do. Students, I want you, with permission from your teachers, to stand up, get ready, have a little space around you, and let's see what the alligator hole looks like.
Yeah, so alligators take advantage of these ecosystems that are wet most of the year because they're just slightly deeper. And they found a depression, and they use their tail and they use their jaw to dig out the muck and vegetation and create a swimming pool.
Oh, so a depression, you mean like a hole? Okay, perfect.
Okay, so we're gonna channel our alligator skills. Are you ready for that? And not only are we gonna shake our tail and create our holes, but we need to shake our mouths as well and our small little claws, and we're just digging our alligator hole. Oh yeah.
All right, so we're digging,
digging.
Move it on down. Ready? Digging, move it on around. Everybody saying it. Digging, move it on around. If you were here, you would see people up on the dock that are working with our cameras. They are shaking their little. So with an alligator, that's called, I guess, just their tail?
Yep, their tail.
So we are in some types of fish, it's called a podonka.
Oh.
So we're not going to shake our podonkas like a boy is yours, but we're going to shake our tail. So let's do it one more time. And then we're going to make our alligator, and then we're going to have a seat.
Yes.
Now, I'm praying that we're not going to have an alligator right now, but I think you do have something that we can talk about. So if you will head over to your little prop center over there. Kids, as you are getting ready to see something pretty spectacular, I want to make sure you have your pencils ready and a clean place in your journal so that you can actually do a sketch here. Now remember, a sketch is just what you see, not what you think you know about this, but what you see. And from behind her tail, her alligator tail, she's going to pull out oh my goodness. So is this a skull?
It sure is. Now, let's compare it for a second. Look at my head. Look at the alligator head. Oh my gosh. That's pretty big.
That is very big.
Right? So this is a cast. So this is not a real skull. And casts help us teach others about these animals. So it's great that we have this cast. So a couple really cool features about the alligators, of course, the teeth, right? So there's plenty of teeth, and alligator teeth, unlike the skull, actually will replace themselves as alligators eat turtles or bones because there are no dentists in the Everglades. And when they lose a tooth because they ate a turtle, then they have one right behind it to grow in. Then they have their nostrils right here, their eyeballs, and this is going to blow your mind. Are you ready for this?
I am ready.
You see this tiny little hole right back here? Take a look at that. Is that a lot of space in there?
That is not a lot of space.
That's where their brain goes.
Oh my goodness, so they have a very small brain.
They do. So they are pure instinct. They are incredibly intelligent. They have that dark skin. You know, many times people think alligators are green. They are not. They are black, maybe a dark green. But that black skin allows these cold reptiles to gather the sun and warm up their body.
I love that.
As a matter of fact, if you've ever looked at the back of an alligator, they have bumps all along the back. Those are called scutes, and they're filled with tiny holes. I can actually grab one to show our students. Those tiny holes get filled with blood and circulate through the body, acting like a solar panel.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to hold this for a
Sure.
second. And earlier we were just trying to decide if this were real, how big this alligator would be. And I believe that you said that you measured from this little bump here, and every inch is a foot.
All the way to the nose.
All the way to the nose. So if I were doing a little guesstimation, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 inches, this could be a 5-foot alligator.
Yeah.
Now I am 5'8", so that means he probably, if he stood up beside me, first of all, I would just faint. But if he did, he would come to about my shoulders. Now you said something, a scoot. Now,
Yes.
it's not an S-C-O-O-T, it's an S-C-U-T-E. And talk
Correct.
about that for a moment.
So these are called scutes or osteoderms. And as you can see, they have tiny little holes. These are a little smaller. An alligator this big, their scutes will probably be much larger, but they grow with the animal. And as they grow, the alligator grows, the scutes grow as well. And you can see the tiny holes. And like I said, that blood pools into the tiny holes and circulates through their body, allowing them to heat up. Now, many times when you are driving through an area that an alligator is on the side of the road heating up, or walking a trail here in the Everglades, it's pretty common to see the alligator's mouth slightly open. And that gives a pretty scary impression.
Right.
I get it. But that alligator is actually cooling itself down. Now, we talked about the brain, and it's at the very top of its head. Now, imagine if your whole body is black, you're getting all of this heat from the sun. It feels so good on your body, maybe not so good on your brain. So in order to cool itself down, it actually slightly opens its mouth, similar to a dog panting.
And that makes sense. And even humans will sometimes open their mouths to cool off a little bit. Now, this is a heavy alligator
I'll take
head,
that from you.
So I'm going to give this back to you. And I would like to talk a little bit about Marjory Stone Douglas. So I'm going to, if you'll put him
Sure.
back, and we'll switch off for just a moment. We talk all the time, students, about how you can make a difference in the world. Making a difference in your classroom could be just holding the door for someone, or being kind to someone, or sitting with someone at lunch when they are sitting by themselves. That is called being a good human. I want to introduce this book to you. It's called Marjory Saves the Everglades. Now, this is a very important story because it's a true story, or written about a true person named Marjory Stoneman Douglas. Now, she was born in the late 1800s. In fact, she lived to be 108 years old, and she was still fighting for what we call the Everglades when she was 93 years old. When I was reading about her, her mother was a nurse, and she just wanted to save the earth. She wanted to save the world. In fact, she decided that she was going to go into the war and help with war efforts, even though they weren't letting women do that at the time. She also noticed this area, this whole Everglades as we know it now. She noticed that it was being developed and things were being drained out, and she was the one that said, This is a river of grass. I want to read just a little part to you. In the 1940s, there was not a lot of scientific research on how the Everglades worked. But Margie didn't just say, okay, well, we don't know. She asked geologists and anthropologists mountains of questions. So if you're that student that's constantly raising your hand and asking questions, good for you. We want you to find answers. She examined the Everglades work, and she wore a hat of straw, but never feathers, because she cared about the environment. She didn't want to take a feather away from a bird. She learned about the limestone that we're standing on right now, and 57-year-old Marjory dug deep into research, and she made a discovery. And that discovery is probably what saved the Everglades. She found out that the Everglades weren't a swamp at all, but a river, a slow-moving, life-giving river of grass. This book, Marjory Saves the Everglades, on our website under Crossing America, there are a lot of activities that you can do with this. Now, we know that she's a very important person here, and in fact, there have been buildings, and there's even a wilderness area named after Marjory Stoneman. Tell us about that.
Yes, so we are not very far from that area, and here in Everglades National Park, we have a recognized wilderness designated by Congress, and it is the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Wilderness.
I love that one person can make such a huge difference, and she didn't give up. Like,
No.
she kept going until it happened. I also read, and you may have to correct me on this one, that the Everglades are 20% of what they were. Is that correct? Am I correct on
It's
that?
a third of what
Okay,
originally,
a third.
Yep, of what they originally were. Remember, we talked about it having the expanse all the way up into Orlando, north of where we are today. And that river would meander through the Kissimmee River Basin, filling up Lake Okeechobee. The Everglades, as it was, is a third. And we are currently undergoing one of the largest restorations of any national park, and that is to help all of the pieces that are left that behave and act as they did originally, just like where we stand today, even up there in Orlando, to help restore those pieces back, to allow for ecosystems for plants and animals, and connect the water, because essentially that water always makes it down here to where we're standing today.
And you were born in South Florida, correct?
I was.
So I'm sure that people that live here have a real connection to this place because it is their water. And we talk all the time about water is life. So I love that you work here. I want to tell a quick story. Like you said before, you were a 5th grade student that came here with your teacher. You became a teacher and brought your students here for field trips, and then moved into being a park ranger. And now you coach and mentor young park rangers who are doing the same. So you are building what we call capacity. You are raising up the next generation of park rangers and good stewards and conservationists. And that's something you can do too, which leads us into our challenge. So we are going to talk about today how you can create a unique water system or protect it. So in this challenge, you're going to explore the unique watershed of the Everglades National Park, its importance. You've learned a lot here today, the structure of it, how it impacts the environment. And then we want you to use that knowledge to create a system to restore and maintain a healthy wetland. You're going to think about things like how you can improve water flow, reducing pollution, restoring habitats. Now you may be saying, but I live in Wyoming. So me helping the Everglades, I can do that, but what about my own area? And that's something we want you to think about. All of our work is based on what the national parks are doing, which is amazing work, but then they want to encourage you to take what they're doing back into your own neighborhoods and communities. We know that Olympic National Park several years ago brought down some of the dams that were there. Dams were important to the area at the time for economic reasons, but then they realized that the salmon were not getting back into the fresh water where they needed to spawn, right, and finish their life cycle. So people, including students, got into the idea of, we need to get rid of those impediments to this water, and now those dams are gone and the salmon are coming back home again, which was really important to the indigenous people that live there. So share your work on a Padlet that has been created for you, and that is located on the website. Teachers, we would love to know what your kids come up with, because rangers are very smart and they get to wear the hat and their brains are bigger than those alligators, but they're constantly thinking, and your idea could be something new that they haven't heard of before. So share your work. You can hashtag it My Watershed. Make sure you're tagging Expeditions in Education and Everglades National Park Service. I cannot wait to see what they create. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see what their ideas are about.
And you referenced Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and although she was one person, she rallied her friends, right?
Including children.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So some children, some teachers, and many people. So she did not do it alone.
She did not do it alone. I'm laughing because I just dropped my book in the water. I drop something in the water every single time, but that happens. She created the Friends of the Everglades, and at the time they could join for $1 a person, and they got up to 6,000 people, and she realized people really do care about this place. I want to see if there's any more questions in our chat window about anything here at Everglades National Park, because Ranger Yvette stayed up all night last night making sure she knew everything. So moderators, do we have any more questions that we can give to our ranger, even trying to stump the ranger if possible?
Okay, so let's get going. So first of all, Miss Truxas's class wants to know just how big those alligators in the Everglades can grow.
All right, so how big is the biggest one?
So in South Florida, the alligators are at their southernmost point in the United States. So it's a little hot for them here. And then because the Everglades doesn't have really large things to eat, so they're eating small turtles and birds, the alligators have a tendency to grow a little slower and stay a little smaller. So on average, a male alligator will be maximum about 13 feet, and a female alligator will max out about 9 feet.
That's still very large.
Dr. Drizzle, this one I think is especially for you. Are there plants and things that grow in the Everglades that can be eaten by humans?
Yes, and so we're going to pull one of those plants now that I can take a bite of.
Okay.
And I think it's called sawgrass.
It is.
And I am going to eat a piece of that sawgrass because I haven't had lunch yet. And you know, living off the trail is good, but here's the disclaimer for this, kids. Do not go outside your school today and pick things off the ground and eat them. You always want to make sure you're using a field guide or talking to a naturalist or an adult that knows this, because when I asked, could I eat this, she said, yes, but I need to pull it from the middle. So tell me about that. Tell me what I'm going to take a bite of.
Absolutely. So sawgrass, the name clearly tells you we're not very creative how we name things. It has saw-like edges. So you don't want to take a bite out of the saw-like edges.
Good point.
Okay? That's an adaptation for collecting water. Just like a cactus, for example.
Right.
So it does protect it, but it also collects water. But our white-tailed deer, so you need to channel your white-tailed deer now, pull out the sawgrass from the center. You see this flesh-like section that has no blades, no teeth, so you can take a bite of that.
So if I were going to describe this to you a little bit more, in my garden growing up, we had something called wild onions. And it kind of has that same feel to it, with the top being more green and thin, but the bottom being a little bit more fleshy, if you will. So I'm going to smell it first. Not much there. I thought it would taste like key lime because we are, you know, in South Florida, but it does not. So I'm going to taste it now. So, not bad. I'm not going to eat this part, this little string, because I don't want it to get caught in my teeth there. So I don't think it has a lot of flavor to it, but there has to be some type of nutrition to it because other things will feed off of this. If I were to eat this only for the next 3 or 4 weeks, I might lose a little weight, so you never know. But I can't take it with me, so I'd have to eat it all now. So I did eat that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do we have any more questions for Ranger Yvette?
We have lots of questions. So a lot of them have to do with alligators. A couple of them, how long do they live and how do they get the bumps on their skulls?
So the bumps on their skull, that's all part of the way that their heads are formed. As alligators grow, their bones grow along with them, just like it happens to us humans. That holds true for the scoots as well. So if you look at a tiny baby alligator, it looks like a big lizard, maybe just about 5 inches, so about that big. And when they're that tiny, their scoots are not even noticeable. They don't need them just yet. They're relying on their mom for some help and some warmth and some protection, because that also helps protect them, almost like armor that they carry. But as they eat bones and calcium is introduced into their diet, which is really quickly because those babies eat very fast, then the bones start to grow.
Okay.
Yeah. And what was the second part to that question?
There's so many of them.
Oh my goodness.
They're both crocodiles and alligators in the Everglades. And how long can those alligators live?
So let me say something about the alligators and crocodiles. This is one of the places, not a lot of places, where they live together in harmony. I mean, they may not like each other, but you find them sort of together. Is that correct?
Well, what's funny is that actually alligators prefer and are perfectly adapted to our freshwater Everglades, like where we're standing in today. And our crocodiles are adapted to the brackish environments. They love the freshwater, they need water to survive, but they actually have adaptations to survive in the saltwater or brackish ecosystems. So they don't necessarily spend a whole lot of time together, and if they happen upon each other, they really just mind their own business. They don't bother each other.
Well, how long do they live?
That's a very interesting question, right? There's lots of different parts to that question. Of course, if an animal is in captivity because it's injured and it's being cared for by humans and it can't be re-released, many times those animals can live a lot longer.
Okay.
However, in the wild, they are facing lots of different challenges. If you're a tiny alligator, you're a really yummy morsel to a great blue heron, for example, or a raccoon, or maybe a bigger alligator. And if you're an adult alligator, these past couple of weeks, all throughout the United States, we've been experiencing lots of cold weather. Guess what? That cold weather has made it down to South Florida.
Yes, it has.
And as a result, some of these animals in their lifetime have never experienced such cold weather for prolonged periods of time. Now you might think to yourself, what's the big deal? Well, if you're not adapted to drops in temperatures for an extended period of time, they don't know what to do. They may not feel mobile enough to eat, or the cold itself might easily kill them. So there are all kinds of factors.
And leaving the killing part out, same thing with humans in South Florida.
Yes.
They're cold down here and the temperature is way above freezing, but they're not used to it.
No.
So they get a little cold. So when you hear people say, oh my gosh, I'm so cold, it's 65, people up north are saying, Oh my gosh, that's a heat wave. So we adapt.
It's hard to feel sorry for us, right?
Yes, don't feel sorry for them. They live in this beautiful land. I think we have time for 2 more questions, Ms. Zimmerman. And then, Ms. Zimmerman and Ms. Schwannekamp and Ms. Bell and Ms. Brown, if you can collect the questions, we will make sure that Ranger Yvette has something to do over the weekend. Okay, so collect those questions for us.
Okay, I will pop in for just a minute. Do the alligators have any predators?
That's a great question. So when they're smaller, the predators are plentiful. And as they grow, they are the top predators, with the exception of a little competition from a non-native invasive, which is the Burmese python.
Right.
So the Burmese python does compete with the alligator at the top of the food chain. Unfortunately, they have had alligators in their bellies when we have collected them and done some scientific research on the contents of their stomach. So it is quite unfortunate, but other than that, they are the top predator. In their growing stages, a larger alligator can easily eat a smaller alligator.
And one more.
Okay, this one I hope stumps you.
Okay.
Do crocodiles or alligators have more teeth?
Which one has more teeth?
Oh my goodness.
She was just flossing an alligator's teeth last week, and I wish she had counted.
You know, that will stump me. I am not going to
stump the ranger.
I am not going to answer that with certainty. My guess is that crocodiles have a few more teeth than alligators, but I can be totally incorrect. They appear to have more teeth. So that's your homework now.
It is. Hashtag Stump the Ranger. We're going to ask you to look for those, the answer to that question, and then your teacher can email that to us, and then we will know that for further times. Ranger Yvette, this has been lovely. I am standing, it's hot, but the water's cool. So I've been
so good.
Now the people that are running everything behind me, they're burning up. But I am doing great now. That's why I'm in front of the camera, because I don't like to do all the extra hard work. But this has been beautiful. You have a lovely home. You do great work. We're so proud of our National Park Service. We love our rangers. We love that we met 4 years ago and you said yes, and then we've been able to continue this relationship. So kids, a couple things for you. Teachers, there is a Padlet that we will email you today that will give you information about where you can share your designs. Ms. Schwannekamp should be putting into the chat window the resources that we've created for this piece. We also want to ask that you share your design so that the park has new eyes on it, if you will. New brain cells that are looking at the question. So let's go to the deck for just a moment. This is where we're going to be in 2 weeks. So February the 11th, we are going from the tippy bottom of Florida all the way to the top of the United States in the middle to a state called Minnesota. We have some Minnesotans online right now. And we're going back to Voyageurs National Park. We're participating for the 3rd year in the Boreal Stargazing Week, where yours truly will be out on the ice lakes again. We hope that we'll catch some fish with ice fishing, and I will probably be on snowshoes again, which is always a fun thing to see if I can stay upright or not. So I want to thank the National Park Foundation for all of their work, our amazing moderators, Ms. Zimmerman, Ms. Brown, Ms. Schwannekamp, and Ms. Bell. We also have an amazing person here that's behind the scenes, Christina Kay. Christina is one of our expeditions and education people. She's getting ready to wave right now. There she goes. We're turning the camera on her and flipping the switch. Oh, come down a little bit. There you go. And don't worry, she has permission to be here today, but she has been helping behind the scenes. But National Park Foundation, Everglades National Park, the Friends of the Everglades, to Amy, don't do it, Amy, Dylan, and Colby for coming out and helping earlier, and to you, we love you. Also behind the scenes we have Steve, my partner in crime, and Dave, the other crime person over here, doing amazing work. And I don't see Ernie the egret, but
I think he's sneaking on the other
he's
side.
on the other. He's right across
He's
the
being
deck from
camera
us. I don't know
shy.
if our people can get a shot of that as we're leaving. But thank you so much for joining us here. We're going to try to get a parting shot of Ernie the egret, and this is a white,
A great egret.
a great egret. And there he is. We're going to switch the camera. I love
It
how.
might be a white heron.
Or is it a herring?
Yep, it is a white heron. Yep.
It's a herring. So here we go. We are going to give you a final thing and we're going to say goodbye. They're switching the cameras right now so you can see it. So on behalf of the National Park Foundation, the Everglades National Park, and Ranger Yvette, we're out of here. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day, and we can't wait to see what you create. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.